The vision was, I want it to be a book that children actually would want to pick up and want to read.
Sally has this gift of extracting them from the Bible, great themes, great complex themes, and makes them so very simple.
Sally's really nice to work with as an author because she's got very clear ideas, but she's also very aware that producing the illustrations isn't her job. So she gives you lots to work with, which is fantastic, but she then steps back and lets you get on with it.
Every story is telling that big story of how God loves us and has come to rescue us, and I think that gets lost. I need to be reminded of that every single day. So in Thoughts to Make Your Heart Sing, that was kind of what I wanted to continually point children to Jesus. Zondervan asked me, would I write a devotional? And my first thought was, I don't want to write a devotional, that sounds so serious, and what would that be? But as what normally happens for me is, that's my first reaction, because I think, I've got to do what every devotional looks like.
These thoughts are to remind you of things that are true. They aren't meant to be listened to all at once, just one a day. They come from the Bible, the place where God has told us all these magnificent things about how He loves us and how we can love Him.
Children need guidance. They're little and we're big and we need to tell them. But they also need grace.
One day, Jesus visited the important city of Jericho and had a meeting. Who with? The mayor? The bishop? No. Jesus made a beeline straight for the biggest sinner he could find, who, by the way, was quite small and up a tree.
It's such a serious subject. I mean, it would be dreadful if you couldn't find some humour. And I did the same with the Jesus Storybook Bible. Wherever it was appropriate, I would get jokes in if I could, and you can't. There are certain stories, of course you can't. You can't with certain, very serious ones. But there are others, like Zacchaeus. Well, he was very small and up a tree. Well, I think that's very funny that he was up a tree. So I put that in there to make it be a laugh. And
when someone important is being introduced, the announcer usually says, Mr. So-and-so, founder of this extra important company. Or, Miss something else, Nobel Prize-winning inventor of this brilliant thing. Do you know how God likes to be introduced? His name is the Lord.
This is another thing Sally brings to the page, which is actually her own sense of humour, I think. I don't know Sally socially very well, but I think she has possibly sometimes a tongue-in-cheek and a wicked twinkle in her eye as well. I'm sure that's right.
I'm sure that's why I like you so much.
Can I ask you?
I love rascals. There's a certain personality in the writing that's a bit like a mother talking to her children, or a rascally aunt talking to children. That's what I wanted, because I don't imagine that I think Jesus was he was obviously full of fun, otherwise why would we be full of fun, He was a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, but I imagine he was the most joyful man ever.
Taking you in his arms.
Oh yes, but she's playing on the words.
Yes.
Just a little.
Yes.
I'd really like it to be a book of hope and comfort to children. And I would really like it to be something they can read with their family. But I think my ideal is that they would go off into a corner and read it themselves. And maybe what my hope was before school. I mean, I have nieces and nephews, and they share with me how difficult it is at school. And one of my nieces was being bullied quite a lot a few years ago. And I think of a child like that, and I think I would love it if a child like that would have a book that could remind them that everything isn't as it seems. And even in those awful playgrounds when you're being bullied, that God is with you, and He can bring good even out of the most awful situation. It's a mystery, but I wanted children to have that sense that He's with them, and He knows, He hears what's going on. Now this next one, just for information, this in my head is the like the high point of the book, where
Yes.
I imagine children will may be able to understand what it means to become a Christian or something.
In World War II, prisoners of war were building a railroad. After their day's work, the shovels were counted. The guard became enraged. One was missing. The prisoners were lined up and ordered to stand there until someone admitted they'd stolen the shovel. No one said it was them. The guard shouted. Still no one budged. The guard threatened to kill all of them unless someone owned up. At last, one man stepped forward and said he had done it. The guard killed him. Later, at the guardhouse, the tools were recounted. No shovel was missing. The innocent man had sacrificed his life to save the others. 2,000 years ago, an innocent man stepped forward for us and sacrificed his life to save us. There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends.
We're not meant to understand everything. It's not for us to understand everything, and that actually is okay. But what we can do is see what potential for love and kindness and self-sacrifice there is. We can see what tragedy can bring out of human beings. And if anything good can come out of tragedy, if there is such a thing as a silver lining to any cloud, then that's okay.
What made this book really interesting to work on from my point of view is that although it's a children's book, it's not a complete story. From the point of view of an illustrator, it was almost like being commissioned to produce 101 editorial illustrations. So if you imagine an article in a newspaper and you have to produce an illustration that accompanies it, and sometimes those illustrations literally illustrate what the article is saying, and other times they kind of complement it by showing you a slightly different point of view or showing you a fairly abstract image that hopefully conveys the same message as the article without going into specifics. I could move from almost say a traditional kind of biblical illustration on one day, and then the next day I'd be researching spacesuits for astronauts. And then the following day I'd be looking up historical references for medieval knights. And so it really was something entirely different every day, which I think was, it's fantastic as an illustrator to be able to do that.
It's been a joy, and it's also actually, because I just finished my play 2 nights ago, it's actually bringing me out of it, and I've enjoyed today because actually you've helped me.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Well, what an honour. That's great.
I think because I worked so closely with Sally and she was so involved in the overall look of the book, it was really satisfying to see the final product and think, yes, every kind of aspect of that I've had some input into, and I was really pleased in particular with how the cover turned out. It was quite a long process. We went through, I think, 12 different versions of the cover before we got to the one that you'll see on the book. But I think it was worth it. It was, it's a very strong cover, and I'm really pleased that I had as much input in it as I did.
Having read Sally's book, now I want to go back to the Bible, and if it does that for me, then what's it going to do for other people? And that's wonderful.